about it is, okay, I'm gonna say something that might be controversial in a room full of Beyonce lovers, but Beyonce just can't get fashion right in the way that Rihanna gets fashion right.
Okay, wait. Wait.
She just can't. She just can't.
The question. You know what's gonna happen when we give people the microphone after, right?
Wait. That went a little beefiest.
Right?
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the voice to have.
Books really saved my life.
I'm so excited to be here in front of all of you. We were totally kikiing in the back, and we've been given wine. So, you know this is about to be a really beautiful, flowing conversation. So I was reading all three of your books back to back to back, and I was actually reading them out loud. I have a 1-year-old at home, so she wasn't going to let me read quietly. So it was very interesting because I would read yours, and I would have to censor, like bleep every third word, which was still funny because I felt like those moments were just for me. They were adult moments. And then Tanisha, one of the things that was so great about yours, and also yours, Kevin, was that I got to really listen to music as I was reading through everything. So every time in any of their books they mentioned any song of any kind, I played it, which added this whole other dimension to the experience. And I really wanted to ask, did you mean for it to be experienced in that way? What was the ways that you were hoping people would get into the musical aspect?
Yeah, mine definitely was. I can't remember if I cut it out of the introduction, but I definitely at some editing point told the reader to listen to the song, because mine's based around a curriculum. So in the class we would start the day with, actually I want people to watch the music video, because a lot of what I'm talking about in the analysis is visual aspects of it too. So watch the music video, listen to the song, and also do the readings. I'm assigning you work in the book, I guess. Do the readings that are mentioned in the chapters too. I didn't want to do all the analysis because it's based on the conversations we would have in class with students, so it would vary day to day. So I just wanted to kind of set those little posts up for people to hit on as they read. So that's extra work, but I think it's fun work because it's listening to Beyonce. So.
Yeah, it creates a whole experience.
Yeah. It definitely does. How many people grew up in the 90s? Yes, so you get it. So yes, I definitely wanted people to listen to music as they read my book. There might only be maybe 1 or 2 Beyonce tracks in my book, but I write about hip-hop fashion in the 80s and 90s, that golden era of hip-hop. And so for me, I couldn't write about things like the Nike Cortez, which we call the Dope Mans, without talking about NWA and the rise of gangster rap and how hip-hop went from being this very regional music to a national music that had fashion attached to it. So lines like Carl Kanai and Cross Colors, Fat Farm, FUBU. In order to really understand those lines and their cultural impact, you had to know the music, because the music and the fashion go hand to hand. So yes, I'm glad you picked up on that and could enjoy the book in that way.
Well, like Beyonce, I should be rapping. So for me, it's a collection of essays. It's a memoir, but it's structured that way. I kind of name them as if they were mixtape tracks. So one is an obvious reference to Nicki Minaj. Others are like more subtle references to Beyonce. My second book is still like, if it were, to me when I do collections, they're like, what if I actually could still sing before puberty robbed me of that gift? And how would it be, like what actually reflects me? And that's for me. And I do take that from Beyonce, because Houston, most things.
Right. Good things come from Houston. Megan Thee Stallion also, like
I was listening to Megan Thee Stallion on the way here. Beyonce understands.
She does understand. She feels it. Everyone understands Megan Thee Stallion. We all understand. I think also one of the things I was experiencing, and we were talking about this backstage, was, so I'm a new American. I'm now like a Canadian and American. And so I feel like, part of becoming an American is like you study all these things about the United States. And I feel like I've gotten some experience of it, but reading just everything together, I felt like I downloaded this huge Black queer experience. And it was just this very iconic, like you gave so much character to places like LA and New York. And I think, as Canadians, we understand those places as being what they are, but I didn't get a sense of like the unique quality of them until you took me there, or things like the crack epidemic or Jim Crow. Like, we don't have the same frames of reference, so really getting into your book really created that whole world.
I appreciate that. Well, for me, just being a Black American, a lot of what you consume, particularly through media, is kind of like an LA, New York perspective, or at least over the last decade. And one thing I really loved about Beyoncé is that Houston is such a unique place. It is one of the most diverse places in the country. 1 in 4 people have been foreign born since I was young. Like, when you ride down the street and see horses and you see all these different things, like, Houston is literally like a gumbo in that way. And it's really hard to, I've never really seen Houston described in that way, and that's one thing I always really liked about Beyoncé, because so many of the things that people see in her art, you wouldn't know unless you were from Houston. Like on Kitty Cat, when she starts rapping, it's not just her rapping, that's her doing the Southside flow. So when people would be on, in like high school, like, I'ma come down, I'ma wreck shop, like she's doing a certain type of flow. Yeah. Even like Get Me Body is a flip of a Beyoncé, a bounce track, while that might be New Orleans. So many people, which is why my last name is also, they're from Louisiana, so they're in Houston. There's so many different things there, and you don't really know it unless someone else from Houston is saying it. And even Beyonce's never explicitly said it in that way, and that was one thing I wanted to do in my work, because I wanted someone like you who would know that to like read it and see this is just as an American city as everywhere else, or has so much to say about like a specific Black experience, particularly Gulf Coast Black people. It's just very important for me to get that out. And again, I look to my Lord and Gyrator for guidance on that. But yes.
And I'll take your Houston, Texas, and we'll raise you a Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Yeah, right.
Which is not a gumbo. I like to say, which is true, I grew up, just to be honest, I grew up a stone's throw from Ku Klux Klan country in Indiana. And so for me, it was really important to write a story about hip-hop fashion, culture, queerness, all those politics from a Black Midwestern girl perspective, which is a perspective we rarely ever hear, if ever. And so to talk about how places like Atlanta were a mecca for me, you know, a place where I could kind of come into my own, my sexuality, my gender expression, et cetera, in a more full way. And how the clothes in the South, like, it was a different style than our Midwest factory-oriented attire. Think about this, like, you come up in a town that everything is organized around the factories. So Dickies and Carhartt and Timberlands, those become part of the wardrobe because that's what we have on offer, right? You know, you can't really, we don't have a Neiman Marcus, right? So you weren't going there to buy designer wares. You were buying what you could find at JCPenney or Value City. And when I went to Atlanta, it was this different mix. I went to HBCU in Atlanta, and you get to see all the flavor from Houston, from New Orleans, Memphis, LA, the Bay Area, New York. And it was this different introduction to Blackness. And so I had to chronicle all those stories. And in one of the chapters, I tell this story about how I went to audition for a job at a strip club, the Atlanta strip club in the 90s, right? But it's all of that, you know, to tell that story through that lens.
I thought you were going to do it. I was like, she's going to do it. I know, I was waiting for it. I was like, this is about to be so good.
So that's why I love the decentering that you do too, Michael, how you take the story away from this very coastal story. The coast is part of your book, of course, but it's rooted in a very Houston Blackness. It's a very specific kind of Blackness.
I appreciate that, and I really appreciate what you say about Atlanta, because to me, I think in a lot of ways, Beyonce and a lot of Black Southern artists are such kind of a conduit to this. There's so much more to the Black experience than what you typically see.
Exactly.
And even among the South, it's so diverse, because Atlanta is not New Orleans, is not Houston, is not Charlotte, is not this part. There's so much there that you can find.
And then you queered it, you know,
Right.
and that was so interesting, because it's like you know about these places that are iconic in Black American imagination, like the barbershop or the church, but then you took it and you really pulled it outside of those spaces and showed us why it was significant as a queer person.
For me, I think a lot of the times people, I don't want to put this because I'm trying to see, I saw the recording. You know, just because we didn't necessarily have like certain terminology or just understand how to put things in words doesn't mean it didn't exist. Like, to me, one thing I will say about comparing from Houston to like New York is that one boy actually brought to my attention once. It didn't work out, but we went out. He mentioned how in Harlem there are certain places where you could be gay but not necessarily queer or trans and be welcome in this space. You would have to go to Brooklyn for that. Whereas in Houston, when you would go to clubs, as I write in the book, everyone's in the same space. So did I necessarily have the terminology for everything? No, but I already knew about how people transition because Teddy, who I wrote about, I met differently in middle school, but knowing Teddy in middle school, it made absolute sense to me. And we all existed in these same spaces. Was this perfect utopia? No, but it was actually a lot more inclusive, more thoughtful, more respectful, more open, freer than many of the places I've been on the coast. And Beyoncé was playing a lot of the time, particularly B-Day, but I wanted to show that black queer life because often black people are depicted as like demonstrably more transphobic and homophobic than other groups, which is just statistically not true in America. Most black people self-identify as LGBTQ more than white people, and we're tiny parts of the population. Most queer parents in America are actually black poor lesbians in the South. Most trans women are black women being killed in the South because most black are black trans women, and they're all throughout the South. They are the working class. I literally saw someone today kind of assigning these stereotypes to the working class people. It's like these working class people actually have more evolved attitudes than you do, and I would know because I am a working class person from working class black folks who might not always have the best language, but in terms of decency, in terms of spaces, I personally prefer, I'm glad I grew up in the South and not in other spaces because I didn't really have to learn you don't go here, you don't here. We were just all crammed together because more often than not, you kind of see the same way you see racism overtly, you see transphobia and queer antagonism and homophobia more. So we already know, no matter how certain people divide themselves otherwise, when you get down to it, a bigot is a bigot, and they lump you in all together. So we were all partying together. So a lot of things that I learned, not necessarily in a classroom, but I already knew, like, this is how this works, and this is how you are supposed to treat somebody, and I wouldn't trade that, up yonder, I'm country, so up yonder is north.
And I think you're talking about something that's really true in all of your books, but that the experience comes before the words, right? Like the experience happens and then we find a way of naming it. And I think about that with your story of the dashiki. And I had no idea, but I remember the first time I came to Harlem, coming from Toronto, and I walked down the street on 125th Street, and there were just all of these like Afrocentric stores with all these prints, and I stood on the corner of like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and I just felt black, like so black. And I feel like, people have this really powerful experience of something, but then only then the naming starts to happen. I don't know if you want to describe more.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I grew up in a blackety-black house, right? The town wasn't necessarily blackety-black, but it was highly segregated, as a lot of northern cities in the U.S. are. People don't really realize that oftentimes. Like, Fort Wayne was highly segregated, went to black schools. But even among those black folks, we were blackety-black. Like, my mom was, like, so unapologetically black before that was a thing, like, that it was right. So she would make her own dashikis and her own gaylays, and she started sewing like this when she was a teenager. She'd go to, she's a badass, right? She'd go to Joanne Fabric, find her material that made her think of Africa, imagine Africa, right? Even if it was just zebra print, And she'd make her dashikis, but she got so good at it that she could then make them without patterns. So she went off to college at Indiana University, Bloomington, where I eventually went. And she could really participate in this Black Power fashion ethos, right? Because she could make her own clothes, where most people in the Midwest didn't have access to those things. So it was very important for me to link this conversation about Black Power, Black feminism, Black nationalism on campus during the heyday of all these campus movements to the Midwest, and to really show what that conversation looked like there, and how women like my mom were looking to the West Coast, to women like Angela Davis, to understand like how that Black feminist politic was supposed to show up on their bodies. But to then link that to cities like New York, where you could go and you could have a Senegalese tailor who could make your dashiki, or you could have a Ghanaian tailor who could make your dashiki from fabric that was, that was shipped across the Atlantic, that was quote unquote authentic, and not the stuff my mom was getting from Joanne Fabric.
Shout out to Joanne.
Shout out to Joanne. Joanne changed lives, all right? Black fashion imaginaries were made from Joanne Fabrics.
And I think, any conversation about fashion, we would be remiss if we didn't mention Beyonce's fashion and the ways in which, there is this I think that people struggle sometimes with this idea of like fashion being a very political place. You do a really good job of really dispelling that entirely. But I think also you get into that too of the ways her aesthetic choices also mark a very political choice.
Yeah, I mean, and more so as it's gone on, or at least it's become more and more explicit and overt. But you can find the traces all throughout the older videos, the older choice. Even back to her mother and hair. Growing up in her mom's salon, that she's singing to customers. She likes to tell everybody that they don't want to hear her sing, but they probably did one. Well, knowing now what we know now, if those people remember hearing her sing then, and post Lemonade, the choices that she's making with fashion and designers really harkens back to this, Afrocentric cultural roots that she has. Not just with that, but also the settings of her videos and everything like that. The sounds on the Lion King, The Gift album, which is better than the actual Lion King soundtrack. And the movie, actually, but and the movie. Right, so she showed us all of that in this primetime special that dropped with a day of promo that we didn't know what was happening, a month after the movie. The album came out, but then we got to see all these visuals that she had on an A. Oh, maybe it didn't. Did it show here the same way? Everything happens around the world for Beyonce. But that one we had to watch commercials, and I was taken out of it because usually we don't have to watch commercials with Beyonce. Anyway, yeah, she's progressed this kind of aesthetic tied to her culture.
Rest in peace, House of Darion.
Yeah. Well,
Rest in peace.
I wasn't
May she
gonna
rest in peace.
We were talking a little bit about the style, and I was saying I like Ivy Park, but I feel underwhelmed. I feel like it could
the lightning
go.
bolt is coming. We can say that on mic now.
I feel like I love Beyonce. I fell in love with Beyonce obviously when she with Drunken Love in particular, and just this whole idea of as a mom getting sexier again. I really had I have feelings about her. Obviously, we have feelings about her, and I want to encourage her to give us more. Right? We were talking about Freakum Dress.
You want her to be better.
I do.
Said Ivy Park can go to the Freakum Dress category.
That's what I'm saying.
It didn't come out that way. Beyonce hears us.
but Ivy Park is
She's already mad at me
does.
for
She
what I
knows
wrote about
everything
her
we say.
husband recently, so let's
And we were talking about that. Beyonce keeps trying to make Jay happen, and he's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not.
I stand with Cap.
It did happen, and now he's.
But the thing about it is, okay, I'm gonna say something that might be controversial in a room full of Beyonce lovers, but Beyonce just can't get fashion right in the way that Rihanna gets fashion right.
Okay, wait.
Ooh.
Wait.
She just can't. She just can't.
The question.
has the
You know
line
what's
for
going to
the
happen when
fashion
we give
piece.
people the microphone
No, that was
after,
a
right?
wait. That went a little beefious.
Right?
They have different aesthetic
They
values.
do. And I really feel like
is
Beyonce
really
comes from
great
the
at
South.
athleisure and
She
we're
does.
getting-
But she's not really great at athleisure.
Wait. Ooh, wow.
She's decent
I almost wear an
at
Ivy
EDM.
Park
I
hoodie
think
tonight.
Ivy
At-
Park
at
looks
athleisure,
lovely.
she's
It
decent.
just can go further. Not everyone wants to be Donatella Versace, and we respect Beyonce in that. You would not get me popped. I'm still trying to. I
Well,
can
she
feel
told-
Julius now, just get out the way.
I'm
She told
already
us it's just
delinquent on my
for-
tithes in the Church of Beyonce anyway, so I think that I'm already backslidden, so I can
Now
say
you know
these
Beyonce
egregious
is not
things.
pleased.
Everyone welcome Beyonce. No.
Not at all. This is what they're here for. This is as the glass is empty.
But
We
you
take
know
people
what? I
there.
think
The Real
Beyonce.
Housewives of the
But here's what I
Beehive.
will say:
Right.
Beyonce is not. Okay, I would say I think that I love the way that Rihanna's fashion message connects with everyday people. I do love that. I love her message of inclusion that she makes very clear and articulate through everything that she does with fashion. But Beyonce totally gets it with costume design.
Yes.
That's where she wins. The way she sees the
on
value
board
of
now.
sartorial
She's a Virgo.
storytelling.
Yes.
That's
Right?
fair.
Like it's her Lemonade.
Just one
Part of the reason why we love Lemonade is because those costumes are immaculate. They're so spot on.
I just want to say, I respect that. I get it. However, if you recall, when Beyonce was supposed to launch her solo career, and y'all, collectively, y'all did not support Work It Out. Beyonce.
We didn't. You're right. We did not support Work It Out, and you know
Beyonce
you didn't.
naturally dresses like, what if Lisa Bonet wore a 1%er, which she technically is. It's like rich Denise Huxtable when she went to Africa on that show we don't really name anymore.
I feel like maybe more Hillary
but
Banks.
Now she has money. That's what she gives.
I feel you.
And recently, because I tweeted this and they reminded me, they did a side-by-side, and she was doing basically Lisa Bonet cosplay, and I was like, I'm right.
She did do it for Halloween.
No, well, that was
She
just
did
her
do
regular
that.
day. See, that's shade. It was not Halloween. She did.
That is shade.
Beyonce just is a free spirit.
She
wants
is.
to roll around with like the natural curls with that big bonnet,
She
listening
does like
to
that.
D'Angelo and singing them songs that y'all didn't listen to, and I wish y'all did, because Work It Out slapped to me.
I mean, but also she does.
And I really
Houston
liked her
very well.
look.
She does Houston well. Like I love what she does with Houston. How she's
Oh, I
bringing
was about
back.
to say, when
the-
you coming for Houston, I have to
No,
watch it.
no,
I'm just
no,
messing with you.
no.
I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. I'm messing with
I
you.
love what she does, like, you know, even with the braids and all the shots with where she and Mama Tina and they're at the beauty supply store.
Oh,
all
I
the
know
things
that
that's-
beauty supply
right?
store.
See?
I went to the same middle school as Beyonce. She had just
See?
left. It's not fair.
It's that thing.
So not fair.
The candy paint on the cars, this whole slab
That is all.
culture.
No, she gets Houston
all
right.
Of that, you know, so I'll give her all
She
of
is the
that.
patron saint of Houston.
No, I appreciate that. I think
I can feel her energy now because it's like
Right
Solange
here.
About to swoop in somewhere.
and yoke us up. I think that one of the things that all of your books really talk about is this idea that people struggle with finding things that are depicted as frivolous as having value. You know, this idea that like pop culture or things that are pretty that can't also have a social purpose and a political purpose. And I think that one of the things that happens really interesting in all of your books is the ways that you reconcile that without ever even addressing that dichotomy.
So I've literally been a stan since Beyonce did the South Side and the No 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 video, part 1. So I've just been here. One thing that has always frustrated me, to your point, is this idea that Beyonce became pro-black like much later. But that's because she did this in terms that can be considered like more academic, more pronounced, more like, and I don't mean this in like, but just to say Malcolm X, and that doesn't alone to me make you pro-black. One thing about what I write about in my book is that I do not come from money, and I am very much aware as a black Southern working class person in every space like this, I am not meant to be here. And what I think people consider to be like pro-black sometimes is just more like pronounced, but it doesn't have to be that. To me, pro-black is Beyonce comes from like money, but the music that she's done, the visuals that the people that she's worked with, the folks from Houston that she's shown throughout this entire time, like to even be the second album, taking like a bounce track, which is very, very regional, and getting Swiss Beats, who's a very well-known producer, to bend, she made the world bend their will to her, not the other way around. And another thing is that even before Lemonade and the Beyonce album, around 4, she was managing herself, so some things didn't go well. Best I never had, respectfully, didn't see it. However, well, she know that wasn't. Like, the Roots version that she performed live is better. I'm a real stan.
The video's not good.
But what I said, that was around the time that R&B was not being played on U.S. radio. And this coincided with the decimation of urban radio, which just means black. And they were recalibrating how you do the chart. So the reason why for literally almost 10 years, like R&B artists still don't really place that high on the chart. They're only now really breaking that. That had Beyonce could have chosen to, like, and I love Usher, he's a legend, but when Usher picked up that glow stick and started doing my Oh My God, yes, it went #1, but look what happened. Where is he now? We love him, he's a legend. But you know what I mean? And Beyonce could have easily followed the pack. All of these R&B artists, even Trey Songz was trying like to do ENM. Like, that's not who you are. Beyonce made a conscious choice. I'm going to do black music. I'm going to stick to black radio, declining or not. I'm going to sell my music at the price point I want because my black fans will buy it, because black audiences do support their artists more than we get credit for. To me, that is just as pro-black. It's showing Houston, sticking to your audience, not deviating from them, like all of those things. Like, sticking to your black country-ass self, to me, is the most pro-black thing you could ever be, because that side, particularly in America, are not particularly fond of Southern black people. You bop along to the music, you copy like the turns of phrase, you print them on T-shirts, you don't always give people the money, but you don't always like respect us, and we're not always relegated on certain statuses as other people. And to me, the fact that it took so long for Beyonce to be critically respected in that specific way, while she deserves every praise that she gets when she does something like that excellent. But to me, that is also short-sighted because she technically has been doing this entire time. She just put it into words that now you can understand, which I think it was a calculated thing to do because one, she just wanted to do certain things, which I respect, but that credit could have came years before because you can't say any pop artist at her level that would elect to do that. That is like a big risk. That could have gone another different way. And the reality is for several years, Beyonce was not placing on the chart. She was selling albums, not placing charts. But she abandoned that because she wants to stick to her black audience and let people come to her, not the other way around. Because one thing that I try to do in my work, and I've mentioned, if I centered white people more, I'd already be rich. If I made myself more like the sad gay black man, I'd already be rich. When you present yourself a certain way to the general public, whether or not they're acknowledge your bias or whatever, there are biases there. Me, Beyonce is like a template on how to be. You stick to yourself, you do the best that you can, and then you bring people to you. Because even along my journey, it was the idea that I was gay and black, that meant niche or double niche. And that's a cute little turn of phrase that you know what that means. And 7-year-old white women read my stuff, so do queer little black boys in the South and every part of the country because I wrote good shit. This is the way something like Beyonce writes something good, that's what happens. And to me, I'm done with my tirade, but
it's the level of excellence.
It annoys me that she doesn't get credit for that.
Yeah,
I was in it. We were in it, right? We all were just.
And I think that another thing that she does really well is like in my first book, Liberated Threads, I talked about like these dress and the big P politics. So I looked at how black women activists across the African diaspora, so various cities across the U.S., South Africa, and the UK, like how they incorporated dress into their activism. And so that was like for me like big P politics, like this formal organizing. But with Dressed in Dreams, I really wanted to look at like this little P activism, as in everyday like politics of getting dressed. And I think Beyonce really connects in that level to like everyday black girls and non-binary femmes, and even if it's just something like a bamboo earring, like right, that cultural reference to something that is so uniquely us, that is so our culture. So even if she's not saying appropriation, what she's saying is there is a black girl origin story for this accessory that y'all may not know, but we were the ones who saw that in a jewelry / record / you can buy a leather jacket / you can buy a mixtape store in downtown Brooklyn or in whatever ward in Houston or in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we found that and said that's special. That piece of jewelry in particular is special because it connects us to this global diaspora of other girls like us who are trying to find our way and express ourselves. And so what I love about Beyonce is that she's connecting in this way, this diasporic, which, like you said, Michael, is more this like kind of academic notion of blackness. But even beyond that, she's very much centering herself in this genealogy of everyday black girls. So when I see her rocking those bamboo earrings and gold fronts, I can also connect to Salt and Pepper, who were like, my ears, neck, and fingers are crazy gold, right, with they bamboo earrings. And so there's a way that I think she does this in a way that's very intentional. And in that regard, I think you're right. She has always done that through her career. She's always made sure that the little P politics, the everyday decisions we make to get dressed, that could get us assaulted, arrested, kicked out of school, all those things. She's saying, I'm bigging up those black girls and femmes. And I appreciate her for that because that's a particular kind of front line that we don't talk about when we're so focused on these big P politics.
Yeah, and another thing that I think is really interesting from an educational perspective in terms of this, because I started teaching the class in 2010, and I was trying to maneuver her in alongside black feminist theorists and like to kind of draw or like imagine some of these connections, even if they weren't as explicitly formed as they came out in Lemonade or Beyond, or even the self-titled album when she finally said the word feminist. Or actually, she didn't say the word feminist on that album. It was said in other people's voices. But she also has built a platform by never shying away from blackness and at the same time tricking white people into thinking a certain thing. I talk about this at one point. She built this platform out of knowing exactly how to make the references just for like the in-group, right? And build and build and build, and then she steps onto the stage at the grass, the field at the Super Bowl with formation, dressed as the Black Panthers, and she's like, fuck you, everyone. Like, here we are. And then that's like my favorite SNL skit of all time, the day Beyonce turned black. And everyone's like, wait, what? No, she was always, she did something. And I think it came with like Halo, maybe. Or If I Were a Boy, there was like the I Am Sasha Fierce moment, where even though the Sasha Fierce side to me was still very black, but the I Am side was very like typical song structure and
very Sarah McLachlan.
Right, it was like.
She's Canadian, right? Sarah McLachlan.
No
Okay.
shade
I
to
love Sarah
Lilith
McLachlan,
Fair.
but,
You just made a lot of friends in the room.
I've been having like this weird Lilith Fair resurgence where I'm listening to all that like white lady music, and it's like, because I went to Lilith Fair when I first. Anyway, this isn't about Sarah McLachlan. She's also released like
Legend,
3
though.
Christmas albums. Why so many Christmas albums? Does anyone know? Okay. So anyway, the SNL skit, she comes out and everyone's surprised, and I'm like, wait, why are we white people surprised? Like, so then I brought it into class. I'm like, why is anyone surprised that she's black? What did she do to trick you? How did she manage this amazing like sleight of hand with all of these references? I mean, I think part of the way my book is structured is that it starts with Lemonade and then tries to prove that everything in Lemonade was in previous moments in Beyonce's career. Because I think it was. And so that's just like a genius business. While she may not be the most genius fashion aficionado, in terms of business moves,
shady?
Michael's still gonna argue with us. I'm kind of swayed by the Rihanna argument and the costume design argument. I don't hate Ivy Park as much as everyone else does. But it's just basic. I mean, it's basic, but that's the point. Kind of, because it's like workout clothes for like when you're getting ready to be Beyonce, but when you're actually Beyonce on stage, you wear something else.
That's your pregame.
Yeah,
outfit.
it's like the pregame clothes. So, and again, business. She's selling us the pregame, and then maybe one day, or maybe she wants us to buy Tina's.
I wore Ivy Park right now.
I almost wore it. Okay, but I wore bees instead.
As soon as I saw Ivy Park, I was like, I'll wait till it's in Marshalls or TJ Maxx.
I'm sorry, Beyonce. I'm praying for everybody on stage.
Listen, I love
My
Marshalls
benevolent Creole
and TJ
queen.
Maxx.
What is happening?
That
Own
just means
Ivy
I'm
Park.
a very
I own
frugal
Ivy Park.
shopper. Okay, I'll wait till it gets there. Right? Thank you. Right? When you can afford it. Where I can
I don't
afford
see
You're
it for this
okay.
beefism.
I don't think anything Beyonce does goes on discount though ever, does it?
I hope. No,
Maybe.
one of my students told me, I teach a feminism
yeah?
and fashion class, and they told me they saw Ivy Park and a TJ Maxx.
Maybe because they're doing a rebrand now with Adidas.
Yeah, I think that's what it
Yeah.
is.
I don't.
We don't acknowledge that. No, we don't. No, we don't. I think one of the things you're talking about, you really talked about, is that representation, right? Like when she said, "I like my baby hair with baby hair," like. And she was also really telling like y'all all about the ways that people had come for Blue Ivy's hair and the ways that she really preserved that little girl's like freedom, and I really just appreciated that, And I think you touch in different ways on representation. You said that you imagined yourself kind of like Katie Couric with a dick.
Yes.
And I was like,
this is how I saw myself being this is how I want to describe becoming a news anchor. That was initially what I wanted to
Right?
be. Until I thought I was too opinionated in college, and then America happened. So
But I think it speaks to, you kind of had to put those two ideas together because there wasn't a representation that you really could like aspire to. And I'm curious about your choice in representing yourselves in these books and telling these stories in such authenticity. You both go to like some really authentic, honest places. The one time in your book where it's not super funny is like when we really get into you talking about your parents and your dad in particular. And I'm curious about your choices of representation. Why did you choose to represent yourself in the ways that you did, and who were you thinking about maybe most of all?
I wrote a book that I wish I had when I was growing up. As after school special as that sounds, that is the most honest answer I can think of. For me, and I say this with great reverence, I love James Baldwin like everyone else, but so many people want to be like the next James Baldwin. He is an amazing writer. I get it. I did not grow up wanting to be the next somebody else. I did not want to be James Baldwin. To be blunt, I actually, while I respect the sentence structure and the way he puts things together and writes about race and stuff, I really liked the fact that people like David Sedaris could write about whatever the hell they wanted to and be funny about it. One thing in my house is that I write about growing with like a violent alcoholic father. My mom is a devout Catholic, like Mrs. Maston Latin Catholic. Therefore, her gay son is not really a practicing homosexual. Oh God, no.
I'm a recovering Catholic, so I understand.
Yes, I am very much a recovering Catholic. No offense to, but no, for me, I wanted to just write something that I wish I had. I wanted to be able to be myself. I wanted to be funny. I wanted to talk about, if I can, my fucked up shit with humor, which is how I dealt with it in my house. I wanted to write something that was true of the people. I wanted to write about the people I grew up around who would not normally get the generosity from like another person, like an outsider's perspective. And I really just wanted to personally just get a lot of that out. I grew up in just a very repressive environment. I was told you don't tell your business, to be protective, particularly as a black person who with certain goals. Sometimes my mom believes that information can be a weapon in that, I don't know how else to say it, but as a black man trying to do certain things, in America, white people can't weaponize that information against you. I was very conscious of that, and I understand exactly why she feels that way, because she helped integrate schools. But for me, I felt like if I didn't share my story, I would just kind of keep continuing what I think is a tradition that needs to die. But I just wanted to be myself and just have the space to just be whatever I wanted to be and write whatever I wanted to write in exactly my way. It took a very, very long time to even get the opportunity to do so, because, you know, when people were picking up EDM sticks, it wasn't as easy for even writers, because there was a very long period when black people were not getting book deals. That literally just started maybe 3 years ago. Black people, unless you were Steve Harvey, or, I don't know, Henry Gates, you were not really getting book deals. It just was not happening. And particularly in my journey, it was very much, you're black, you're gay, you're funny. Don't you just want to talk about how awful it is to be you? That literally was the context. It was like, it's so awful to be you, right? Because that is typically how people consume otherness, particularly if you are black. You only in terms of pathology, it's so awful to be you. I just did not want to do that. Like, I didn't have as nice a life as Beyonce did, but there's a joy to her music, there's a joy to her art. There is I wanted to mirror that in some way, because as I write in the book, she really is like my point of reference of being black, being country, being yourself, just working hard, aggressively, and getting to a point where, again, people come to you, you don't chase them. And for me, I just wanted to do that, and I really am proud of that book. I'm worried about the second one, because that's actually even more open, but it'll be all right.
I'm excited.
Like you too, you know, I grew up with these ideas that you don't tell your business,
Right.
you know, don't ever let them people know what you got, you know.
They're Beyonce actually,
you
right?
know, right? And then on top of that, I'm a historian. So then professionally, I'm trained that there's like this objective distance from your subject matter, that, you know, you're not a part of the story. You're the objective voice, which I don't believe that that's possible. It's something that the white boy historians can get away with. People don't think that they have a connection to their work, but as a black woman historian, people assume I have a connection. I study black women because
Or
I'm a
that
black
you're not
woman.
influencing your work in the process of studying
Right.
it.
You know, and so to write a memoir, to me, it wasn't something I ever intended to write. I didn't want anything that was really about me. And so this book kind of blends memoir with cultural criticism and the skills I've gained as a historian to kind of tell this more cultural and political history of the United States. But in doing that, I had to open up and I had to tell so many of my own stories. And one of those was really my origin story, which is that my father is the descendant of Alabama sharecroppers, and that my grandmother came to the Midwest to flee my grandfather and an abusive relationship that she was in with him. And ultimately, he kills her and kills himself in front of my father and his siblings. And it's like hearing fragments of this story growing up, like how do you reconcile who you are and how your people got here when so many people won't even tell you that story. So you kind of feel like you're disconnected from even an origin story, because there's so much shame around what happened to your grandparents. So part of the work that I had to do in this book, and that I've been committed to doing, is recovering that history and reclaiming the history of my grandmother, and realizing that she's like so many black women who migrated to the Midwest from the South who weren't coming for better jobs, like the migration myth tells us, because black women knew that we couldn't get work in the factories. So it was either work as a domestic in a white person's home in the South or work as a domestic in a white person's home in the Midwest. It wasn't that. They were fleeing a regime of racial and sexualized violence and terror in the South for better conditions in the Midwest. And women like my grandmother realized that often that wasn't the case, right? So I use that as a way to open up my book because, A, my grandmother's spirit, that's the spirit that lives within me. My father was the first of his siblings to be born in the Midwest. He was the freedom baby, right? So I use that as a way to not intellectualize this notion of like freedom dreams or like a black freedom politics in this very intellectual, erudite kind of way, but to say, no, black women like my grandmother had a vision. They were trying to build a world for their families, and I'm a descendant of that. And so I use that as a way to talk about dress and why dress matters so much. Like if my big mama had a fur coat and she passed down that fur coat to me, that's why that would have mattered, because look what this woman endured to even get here, right? And that's what clothes mean for black people. It's not just this frivolous thing. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the frivolous thing. Okay, we can have that, right? But it's steeped in a tradition, and it's steeped in a tradition where people literally laid down their lives to make that thing happen for us. And so for me, I couldn't, if I really wanted to write this book, I had to tap into something that was real and genuine, that didn't just start with an obsession with a famous person, right? But it really started with an obsession with understanding where I came from. And why we so country. We country in the Midwest, too. Have you been in the Midwest?
Y'all are.
Oh, we real country.
I know.
I mean, I have a very different relationship to representation in my book, right? Because I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm white. So,
Thank you for being brave.
they got It's true. Okay, so, but I'm also in the book, like, as the teacher of the class. It's written more narratively than just like an analysis of Beyoncé. And whatever I'm doing next is much more just like memoir narrative about myself and my story. But for the pieces that are in the book, which aren't necessarily so vulnerable or, telling a ton about my backstory, it was important for me to always be very present as the white man that's doing this and as the white man who believes that white people are often the problem doing this. And some people are like, then why write it? But it's still like a story that I wanted to tell and show that there are ways that white people can listen to black women. I only cite black women in the book. I only assigned black women's work in the class so that I thought of myself as a facilitator rather than this is what this means and da-da-da-da-da. Because I grew up in Utah as a Mormon, ex-Mormon, whatever now, gay, and I came to learn about the world itself as different from what I knew by reading black women. In the library, just stumbling across some. I can't even remember. I think Alice Walker was maybe one of the first things, and we were assigned no black women, no black people to read in high school, and so I was just kind of so interested in experiences that were different than mine, and I think more white people should be more interested in, not speak over them or speak to them, but be interested and learn from them. And that was part of it's not just about Beyoncé, it was also my way of, I'm a huge Beyoncé fan, and so it was an easy way to marry the love of pop culture and that music and Beyoncé herself with this longer history of black women, some academic, some popular, right? It goes all the way back from Sojourner Truth in the book to, I don't even know who the most recent person is that I cite, Brittany Cooper. There are chapters in your book that I would assign with Beyoncé songs if it had been out before the book was written. Yeah, there's so many actually, just the whole book. And so I wanted to kind of, I was teaching a mixed group of students too, because it's just intro, people signing up for gender studies as their elective, not knowing, because it started as just part of an intro class and then it graduated into a full class. And so how do you get all of these? It was at Rutgers University too, which is touted as the most diverse campus in the United States, which is kind of false, but they skew statistics based on a Newark campus. Anyway, I was not on the Newark campus, I was in a different one. And so I had a lot of white students, and I was like, how do I get them interested in talking about gender, race, sexuality, all these things, and learning about the history that's different than what they might have been taught already. And this was like the perfect way, because also they're like Beyonce fans. Like I said, the white people were tricked into loving her, just not tricked. I mean, it's not it's not a trick, because she's worthy of that love, right? But it was this interesting thing so that she brought them in, and now we can use that as a way to teach everyone, like she kind of does in Homecoming herself now, which is why my class is kind of irrelevant now, because she's starting doing it herself. So so my kind of maneuvering around representation is in that way.
And I think part of it is also this way that Beyoncé gets humanized, and I think that some people forget that she's a whole person, that she has feelings, and she'll come out in like little lines and songs that remind you that she hears what we're saying about her, and she just wants to let us know that we should stop and behave ourselves. And that's super fair. But I also think that you talked about this process of humanizing. And I think that one of the things you talked about with your dad was like working so hard to be not like your dad, to only get to a point where you recognize that you were like your dad in certain ways, and you had to humanize him to forgive him. And you talked about that with your mom too, that after the separation and the ways in which she like really was trying to save everyone in the whole world around her.
You read my book.
I read your book. I was in it, I'm telling you. And the ways in which, you had to reconcile with. I remember you talked about that call that you had with her, and you were like, you know what, maybe there was more of an opportunity for me to connect.
It was about this.
It was about the strip club.
Yeah. And I think that just this process of what it means to humanize these people that we deify, right? Like our parents are definitely the first people that we look at in our lives, and we're like, you are gods. You are everything that is beautiful and right in this world. And then, over time we come to realize that they're people. And I think we have that same experience with Beyonce, right? And it's like, yes, we know who Beyonce is, what she brings to this world, and she's a person and a mom and has all these feelings. And so I'm curious to hear you talk about that process of humanizing and what that looks like.
I deleted that blog now, but I've not completely deified Beyonce. I mean, she's my Lord and gyrator, but I can be critical when need be. Actually, early in the year, I want Beyonce to hold my book. I know for a fact that the Ken.
Is you not deifying
the
her.
Ken have it's coming. The Ken has heard of it. I just need her to whatever. But like early in the year, like I do not agree with Jay-Z did with the NFL. I don't like how he spoke about Colin Kaepernick. I wrote about it. I'm not assuming she would read it, but I do Beyonce as a lurker, so she kind of hears everything. But I revere people, but people are all human. They're all fallible. You cannot, and I still function as a critic, so I'm going to be a critic. With respect to my dad and my mom, for me, I thought it was really important. When I say it took a long time to get the book deal, I'm not glad, but the book came out when it needed to come out, because if I sold the book sooner, it might have been an angrier book. That doesn't mean I'd be any less proud of it, but I think I would have been writing in a much angrier state towards my father. For me, it was just about, this is a person who was beaten by his father for defending his mother, shotguns held to his chest, his mother abandoned him, left him there to be beaten until he could leave. Right. He has a lot of scars. I write about his alcoholism, but my dad is still human. You can grow up wanting to frankly kill someone because of the abuse that happens in the house, but you still love them because they gave life to you. And for me, it was important to figure out exactly why are you the way that you are, and how does that impact me? It's not that I never knew it. I write in the book, he used to say these things, but you would say it in the context of like, you just got into a fight with my mom, we're fighting you off of her, or fighting you just because, and you come into our room with tears trying to explain why you're messed up. That doesn't really absolve you in the moment, but as an adult, I can now say, addicts are not born out of thin air. It comes from a place. It's not about it's also, for me, finding my own sense of closure, because he doesn't, and frankly, my mom doesn't either. I love my parents. They don't have the language to give me the closure that I'm seeking, and they're not in the place to give me the closure that I'm seeking. I can create closure on my own by really assessing, kind of doing the work that I do with other people. Stop analyzing other people. Analyze your folks. how would you view them from this? And just from a critical level, but as a person, as their child, and then to ultimately forgive them as much as you can and to really make peace in a way. And so for me, I wanted to write about my father honestly, but respectfully. And the same goes for my mom, because I knew my parents were not going to read the book. In fact, I knew it would probably be a point of contention. And one thing that happened is, I know for a fact my mom didn't read my book, but my aunts, her sisters, both told me, they said, you were honest but respectful, and believe me, if two Southern black women in their late 50s and early 60s say that you were honest and respectful about your parents, that is probably the best compliment you're going to get, because they are of the folk that you don't tell your business, you don't write about your folks, and you don't disparage them for public consumption, which was not my intention. I think they read it and knew that I came from an honest place, just genuinely trying to write about how their actions made me feel and how it was difficult for me to find peace, and this is how I found peace. I think it was really important to do that. You don't, I do think of certain people, Beyoncé, in a very high esteem, but I did learn from my parents before anybody else is that everyone can get it eventually. And not necessarily in a negative way, but no one is perfect. You don't revere anyone, and particularly just growing up really Catholic, I had this idea of what God, I thought God was, and I had to even lower that, more human level about what does God mean to me, not how God was explained to me. And to be able to even see God in that way actually helps me see other people on a more honest level. I'm done being Ayanla now, but I meant that.
Beloved.
So you got deep there.
Beloved. My mom and Beyonce, I'm realizing, have something in common. So there's a way that, we talk now about Beyonce and how she kind of shields herself, and she's very selective about how she appears, where she appears, what she shares about her inner world and the interiority of herself. But she wasn't always like that. And when you go back, especially around that time that the original Destiny's Child was breaking up, she was on Wendy Williams talking about it. She wrote an open letter to the people in the group. I mean, Beyonce was putting herself out there and open as a teenager. And she was shunned for that.
Yes,
and
she was.
She went into a depression after that. And I think Beyonce has unfortunately had to learn a lot of these ways of self-protecting, because she learned at such a young age what a vicious public could do for you. And while my mom didn't have to experience that in that kind of way, she's of a particular generation, which you don't tell your business. And she also, if you read in the book, I don't want to belabor all those points, but there's a way that she grew up that kind of shaped her and her sense of identity, but eventually she becomes a police officer. So when I grow up, I only know my mother as a law enforcement officer in our hometown. And so she's black, she's a woman, she's on this police force, and so she shows up tough, right? She has to be like, I have to protect my community. We always lived in the hood, because she was like, I don't care how much money I ever make, we're never living out of the hood, because this is where I patrol, and I always want to live among my people. I'm never going to be one of those cops, right? So that was really important to her, but it ruined my social life, right? Because everybody was like, you Popo's daughter, you 5-0's daughter. Dudes was like, oh, nah, I know who your mom is, right?
Nobody messing with them laws.
Right? My mom, nobody is messing with it. So that was my life. And so because of that, she was always so stern and tough. Even when she took off her uniform and she put on these elaborate outfits and dresses and leather jackets and hats with the matching tights, with the brooch on the pumps, right? Even when she did all that stuff, there was still like this toughness about her. And it created a lot of friction between us. And it wasn't until very recently that she started to let a lot of that go. And I got to see that my mom was like this beautifully complex woman in ways that I just didn't even know. And more than anything, I'm so proud that my parents entrusted me to tell their stories. And that they were able to be threadbare before me because they trusted me to do the right thing with their stories. Even though there was this moment where I told my mom, I was like, yeah, I told the story about you stealing the steaks from the store down the street. She's like, you told people I was a thief? I was like, yeah, but Mom, it was all part of your redemption story. It's all part of the redemption story. But the fact that they trusted me to tell those things, and I feel like that for me has become one of the things that's important for me as a storyteller from the Black Midwest, is that so many people in my community will never have the platforms, the stages, the book deals that I have to tell those stories, but that so many of them trust me to do that good work. And that probably matters more than any other validation that I have gotten, to go home and still feel like those people go up for me. Like, you are us, you are one of us, you're part of this community. Thank you for making us visible for all these other, they wouldn't have said visible, but they would have been like, yo, you made everybody see us, T. And I'm like, yes, you're right, I did, because I love where I'm from. And I think that getting past some of my hurts with my mom and being able to see her as fully human was part of the pathway to really appreciating where I'm from.